Hi there. In this video, I want to tackle a thorny subject for the Church of Nowhere, or the Church of Nothing, which is so-called anti-natalism, which is the philosophy that because we humans should never have been brought into existence by a creator God or by the action of chance alone, we should definitely not breed more of ourselves. There should be no more human beings. And I think there are about 7 or 8 billion human beings at the moment. But if we could stop breeding, then the poor old Earth might be given half a chance to regenerate herself, symbolically, symbolically saying, or if the human race was in fact made extinct, then perhaps life on Earth would continue its merry way without the assistance or otherwise of human beings. Mostly interference rather than assistance, I have to say. Although sometimes humans do assist in the process of evolution and even ecological maintenance. But it's pretty rare. On balance, we human beings are a rough rum lot. Um, you know, you take the three things. You take creativity, preservation, and destruction, the three forces that govern everything in this universe. In order to create, human beings destroy. In order to preserve themselves and their culture and their way of life and their economics system, they destroy, and then they just openly destroy with war and ecological war and everything like that. I was watching this video on the former Soviet Union and the ecological disasters, hot areas of the former Soviet Union, where life on Earth ceases to exist because of the amount of pollution in that particular area, radioactive pollution, toxic heavy chemicals. They have certainly done a number on the land of Russia in order to make it, they were in a technological race with the USA, you see, and also military industrial race as well. And they had no checks and balances. They had no ecological environmentalist movement. Or if they did, it was very, very much sort of state controlled and had to be careful what it said and did, because if it came up against the 5-year plan, then they'd be for it, So because of the ridiculous competitive technological race with the West, the land of Russia has been raped over and over and over again. And people say, it's because of communism. Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. Or maybe it's got something to do with just the actual collective personality of the Russians themselves, which is a controversial thing to say, and which I'll have to come back to in another video because that's fraught with philosophical difficulties, actually, and inductive logical fallacy, if I talk about the Russians, etc., or even the communists. Suffice it to say that for whatever reason, large areas of former Soviet Union are literal no-go areas, the ecological disaster areas. Having said that, of course, there are the same in the West as well, and in the USA. It's just that I think that, goodness me, without Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth campaigning in the 1970s and 1980s, probably there would be vast tracts of land in the USA and in Western Europe and in Britain, for example, that would be similarly damaged, irreparably damaged and polluted by radiation and heavy metals and other toxins, gases, and things like that. Gases make acids in the soil, of course. It would be a disaster. And it only goes to show, really, that, we definitely need an environmentalist movement as a watchdog to make sure that the greed of the corporations doesn't actually result in people dying of mysterious deaths. And I mean, there are certain areas. I mean, for example, in Wales, South Wales, where there was a former hat making factory. There's a whole lot of mercury, which is either in the soil or in the water or in the trees or something. And this is going back to the 19th century. And a lot of people have actually been poisoned with mercury in these areas of Wales. And you know, in the northern part of Japan as well, people have actually died of mercury poisoning. So it's not even the current rape of the land; it's previous ecological disasters that are still having effects and still affecting the health of ordinary people in those areas. So the sins of the fathers and all that kind of thing are certainly visited on the third and fourth generation even today. And these pollutants were put down in the 1950s very often, or even before then, and we're still feeling the effects of them. So, you know, sort of the environmentalist movement has been like a holy guardian angel as far as the human race is concerned. But still, when we look at humanity in general, humanity is a destructive, horrible virus kind of creature, many-headed beast of Revelation, which devours and with greed and fear, and destroys itself and everything else around it with its greed and fear. Mostly fear, because of course greed really is the fear of scarcity, is the fear of losing out. And you know, when you have that, it's powerful emotion, or the two most powerful emotions, fear and greed, as a sort of double-headed axe, as it were. Then humanity uses this double-headed axe to literally destroy everything around it, and ultimately to destroy itself, probably, which would be a very good thing. So into this rather depressing picture of humanity, and people say, well, what about what about art, and what about music, and what about altruism, and what about people being good, and what about veganism itself as a movement, and environmentalism in itself? Surely that means that there is hope for the human race. Well, maybe there is, and maybe there isn't. I don't know. All I know is that fear and greed, and you know, the fact that corporations are money-making machines, not even run by human beings, but are there just to make money and to push the price of stocks and shares up, 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 and to make more money on the stock market than ever before. I mean, you know, to give you some idea of the corporations and how they think. I mean, and it probably are human beings steering this whole sorry mess along. I mean, I was an entrepreneur when I was younger, and I met this guy who had this clothes shop, you know, in my local town, and he said to me that every morning he'd get up and he'd read the newspapers, and he'd go on internet feeds and Twitter and Facebook and that, in order to see what products and services are currently trending, and even to try to make predictions about what will trend in the future, especially with regard to clothes, for example, which was his speciality. And so he'd get up early in the morning and he'd do all this analysis and write down all the things that are trending or will trend in the future on a piece of paper. And then he'd go to work and he'd run his current business all day. And then he'd come back, and in the evening, he'd go through each of these items on his piece of paper, and he'd do what they call a SWOT analysis to analyze whether he could provide the gap in the market, whether he could personally meet demands that are trending or are likely to trend. And he'd do this in the evening before he went to bed. So he never stopped thinking. And he said to me, to be an entrepreneur, to be successful, you should never stop thinking about how to make money. You know, all the hours that you're awake, and possibly even dreaming as well, you know, think of ways of making more money. Because he said, you know, the competition is so fierce that other people are jumping on the bandwagon that you're on, and that they are biting at your heels. And so the fear of what the competition is doing should drive you ever to think of more elaborate ways of making money. And basically, obviously you have to stay within the law, but even then, you can bend the rules a little bit sometimes to maximize profits. And I suppose if you could really get away with it, you could break the law, especially if everybody else is breaking the same law and nothing is actually done about it, then that's probably okay as well. I mean, so that was his attitude, and I was thinking to myself, well, if that's the attitude of this one person, an ordinary, decent, upright person living in a small town, running a small business, if that's his attitude, then think what it must be like to be a CEO of a corporation, when literally all you're doing is sitting in your office thinking, how can I make money? What is trending, what is not trending, what products and services, where is the demand for it, how great is the demand for whatever, and you're thinking about buying other companies as well, companies that could be successful in the future, and you're trying to invest in something which will trend later on to be ahead of the pack, because the first rule of business is always to be first, okay? First with everything, and be a first, be smart, and cheat as well, as they say. But you've got to be careful about cheating, because it is sometimes against the law and you could find yourself in a heck of a lot of trouble. And also you can get yourself bad publicity as well, which you talked about before. You can have the environmentalist lobby on you, people writing letters and stuff like that, which isn't good for business, which isn't good for the corporate profile or corporate image. So that's another thing to factor in. But generally speaking, it shows that we humans greed and fear are what drives people, ordinary people, that is, and also extraordinary people as well, like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, they are money making machines. They do nothing but make money. And even though Ty Lopez says, oh well, it's not all about the money. It's about what you can do with money, and the lifestyle you can have, and the good that you can do through supporting charities. Blah 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 blah. At the end of the day, there is nothing really to excuse the behaviour of human beings who have money and power, because they just simply want more of it. And more of it some more after that. It is human nature, which is why people say to me communism could never work, because that is what human nature actually is. And communism quickly becomes corrupted by the people that are greedy and fearful. Okay, well, that may be or maybe not, I don't know. But so you could say, well, basically we shouldn't be breeding more fearful and greedy persons. And as they say in philosophy, future persons have no moral ontology. So it's not like you're being nasty by not having children and not breeding, because future persons, don't really count. It's the persons that are alive now that have rights, that have moral ontology. But it's not only the human beings, but the animals and the whole biosphere itself has rights. A right to complex rights, not the same rights perhaps as human beings, but certainly rights. And so therefore, anti-natalism, becomes something which is almost symbolic, really. By not having children, you are almost symbolically saying, oh goodness, human beings are a bad lot, and I recognize the badness in myself as well, and I don't want to produce children that through no fault of their own simply become corrupted by greed and fear, and are just going to be monstrous creatures of consumption. And one hopes, of course, that they will become vegans, and they will live minimal lives, minimalist lives, and reduce their carbon footprint and all that. But even given that, at the end of the day, when all other things are considered, human beings are terrible, and we we should be not prepared to create more human beings. So that's sort of part one of this particular presentation, because I've already gone on a lot and I've given you a lot of thoughts for the day, and I just want to sort of park it there, really. And if you want to chime in with this debate, please feel free to do so.